The security officer spoke politely, but firmly.
Ma'am, I'm gonna have to ask you to leave.
Every executive in the ballroom turned toward the young housekeeper. She wasn't supposed to be there. The annual board meeting of the Grand Crescent Hotel Group was reserved for investors, executives, attorneys, and auditors, not housekeepers.
What exactly do you think you're doing?
The chairman folded his arms. The young woman swallowed, tightened her grip on a worn notebook, and answered quietly.
I think someone has stolen nearly $900 million from this company.
Silence. Then came the laughter. Not nervous laughter, dismissive laughter.
Our accountants have spent 4 months reviewing every transaction. So tell me, what exactly do you think you found that they missed?
The young woman looked down at the notebook.
I found something they weren't looking for.
The smile slowly disappeared from the chairman's face. Because confidence looked very different from arrogance. And this young Maid wasn't arrogant. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. 5 days earlier, at exactly 4:12 every morning, Margaret Carter unlocked the employee entrance behind the Grand Crescent Hotel in downtown Chicago. She had worked there for 22 years. Long enough to remember when the marble floors had been installed. Long enough to recognize returning guests by the way they folded their newspapers. Long enough to know that the richest people often left the biggest messes behind. She took pride in her work. If a guest notices the room, she often told new employees, "We've done something wrong. Our job is to make comfort feel effortless." Her daughter, Emma Carter, had heard those words since childhood. Now 19 years old and home from community college for the summer, Emma volunteered to help her mother on weekends to earn extra money for tuition. Unlike many of the other employees, Emma wasn't interested in hotel gossip. She noticed systems, patterns, small routines that repeated every day. When one tiny routine changed, she noticed that too. That morning, she pushed a housekeeping cart toward the executive floor. The hotel hadn't officially opened the level yet. It was reserved for a private board retreat. Security had doubled. Several luxury SUVs waited outside. Inside, expensive suites filled the elevators. "Big meeting today," another housekeeper whispered. "They say investors from New York are here." Emma smiled politely and continued folding fresh towels. She never paid much attention to powerful people. Power, she'd learned, rarely looked down. At 8:40 that morning, Emma received an unusual assignment. Room 2816. Normally, executive suites weren't cleaned until guests checked out. This room had been marked immediate. When she knocked, no one answered. Using her staff keycard, she entered carefully. The suite was spotless. Too spotless. The bed had never been slept in. Fresh coffee still steamed on the table. A laptop charger remained plugged into the wall. Someone had left in a hurry. Emma began replacing towels when something caught her eye. Several pages lay half-hidden beneath a leather portfolio. She wasn't trying to snoop. She simply reached down to keep the papers from falling onto the wet bathroom floor. Across the top, she read 3 words. Property acquisition summary. Below it appeared rows of numbers. Millions. Hundreds of millions. Company names she didn't recognize. She quickly looked away. Housekeeping staff were trained never to read guest documents. She placed the papers exactly where she'd found them. As she turned to leave, something else stopped her. A page near the bottom carried 2 signatures. They were identical. Perfectly identical. Even the tiny curve in the final letter matched. Emma frowned. Her grandfather had worked for 30 years examining insurance documents before he retired. When she was little, he'd played a game with her. He'd hand her 2 signatures and ask, "Which one is real?" He always said something she'd never forgotten. No 2 handwritten signatures are ever exactly alike. Emma stared another second, then quietly left the room. She said nothing, but she couldn't stop thinking about those signatures. Over the next 3 days, Emma noticed something odd. The same executive suite kept being booked, yet no one ever appeared to stay overnight. Fresh towels disappeared. Coffee was ordered. Meeting rooms were reserved, but the beds remained untouched. Every single time. She mentioned it casually during lunch. Another housekeeper shrugged. Rich people are strange. Maybe. But strange wasn't the same as impossible. Emma borrowed a notebook from the supply room and began writing down dates. Room numbers. Arrival times. Departure times. Nothing confidential. Only observations anyone could make. After 3 days, a pattern emerged. Every mysterious booking happened exactly one day before large payments appeared on the hotel's internal purchasing schedule posted for department managers. The amounts weren't small. 20 million, 35 million, 48 million, each listed as payments to renovation contractors. The strange part? Emma had never seen renovations. No construction crews. No equipment. No closed floors. Nothing. The money kept moving. The work never appeared. She stared at her notebook. "There has to be an explanation," she whispered. She wanted there to be one. That evening, Emma showed her notebook to Margaret. Her mother barely glanced at it before gently pushing it back across the kitchen table. "Honey, leave it alone." Emma looked surprised. "But doesn't it seem strange?" Margaret sighed. "I've worked in hotels longer than you've been alive. There are things we don't understand because they're above our pay grade." Emma nodded slowly. "I know. But what if?" "No." Margaret reached across the table and squeezed her daughter's hand. "I didn't spend 22 years protecting this job just to lose it because somebody higher up made a mistake." She smiled sadly. "Promise me." Emma hesitated, then nodded. "I promise." But promises made from fear are often the hardest promises to keep. End of part 1. The next morning, Emma intended to forget everything. She truly did. Until she found an envelope that wasn't meant to exist. Inside was a payment authorization for $187 million, signed by an executive who had died almost 6 months earlier. Emma's hands began to shake. Someone wasn't just making accounting mistakes. Someone inside the Grand Crescent Hotel group was using the names of the dead, and whoever it was had no idea a hotel maid had just uncovered the first crack in a $900 million fraud. Emma stared at the payment authorization until the numbers began to blur. Authorized by Richard Langford. She knew that name. Everyone at the Grand Crescent Hotel did. Richard Langford had served on the company's board for nearly 20 years before passing away from a heart attack 6 months earlier. His portrait still hung in the executive hallway. His signature should never have appeared on a document dated only 2 weeks ago. Emma carefully slid the paper back into the envelope. Her pulse raced. There had to be an explanation. Maybe the paperwork had been prepared before Mr. Langford died. Maybe someone had forgotten to update a template. She wanted to believe that. She desperately wanted to believe it, because the alternative was far more frightening. That afternoon, Emma walked past the accounting department. The office doors stood open as employees hurried between desks carrying folders. She waited until the receptionist looked free. "Excuse me," Emma asked politely. "I'm trying to return an envelope that may have been misplaced." The receptionist smiled. "Which department?" "I'm not sure. It has Mr. Langford's signature on it." The woman's smile disappeared. She held out her hand. "I'll take it." Emma hesitated. "I actually wanted to make sure it reached the right person." "It will." Her tone had become noticeably firmer. Emma handed over the envelope. The receptionist slipped it beneath her desk without even looking at it. No receipt. No questions. No curiosity. "Thank you. That's all." "Yes." Emma walked away. Something about the exchange felt wrong. Not because of what had been said, but because of what hadn't. Later that evening, Margaret introduced Emma to someone she hadn't seen in years. Thomas Green, the hotel's retired chief engineer. He had spent 35 years maintaining every pipe, boiler, elevator, and electrical system in the building. He greeted Emma warmly. "I hear you're helping your mom this summer." "I am." He smiled. "Good. This hotel needs more people who pay attention." The words lingered in Emma's mind. After dinner, she finally asked him a question. "Mr. Green, have there been any major renovations lately?" He laughed. "I wish. They've postponed nearly everything." Emma frowned. "But accounting keeps approving millions for renovation projects." His smile slowly faded. "What projects?" Emma realized she had already said too much. "Oh, maybe I misunderstood." Thomas leaned closer. "Emma, I worked here longer than anyone alive. If someone spent $50 million repairing this hotel, I'd know." For the first time, Emma felt truly afraid. The next morning, she returned to work determined to keep her promise to her mother. No more questions. No more investigating. Just clean the rooms. Go home. Forget the signatures. Forget the numbers. It lasted exactly 43 minutes. While replacing bottled water inside an executive conference room, she noticed several binders stacked beside a projector. Each binder carried the same label: Capital Improvement Projects. She wasn't trying to read them. She simply noticed every binder had the same project code. Exactly the same. That shouldn't happen. Different projects received different tracking numbers. Even she knew that. A man entered unexpectedly. Emma immediately stepped aside. "Sorry, sir." The executive barely looked at her. "Leave the water." She nodded and rolled her cart toward the door. As it closed behind her, she heard him speaking on the phone. "No, don't use the old company anymore. Create another vendor. The auditors are asking questions." Emma stopped walking. Vendor? Another vendor? She didn't understand everything she had heard, but she understood enough. Someone was changing company names. Why? That evening, Emma unlocked an old cedar chest in her apartment. Inside were dozens of notebooks belonging to her late grandfather. He had documented everything during his career examining insurance fraud. One notebook contained a sentence highlighted in blue ink. "Fraud rarely hides inside large transactions. It hides inside ordinary transactions repeated hundreds of times." Emma read it 3 times. Repeated. Patterns. That was it. She spread her own notebook across the kitchen table. Room bookings. Payment dates. Executive meetings. Vendor names. One by one, she connected them. Every suspicious payment happened within 24 hours of private executive meetings. Every payment involved companies registered less than 3 years earlier. Every company had nearly identical mailing addresses. Different names. Same buildings. She opened her laptop. Public business records were available online. The first company listed a mailbox in Chicago. The second, the exact same mailbox. The third, the same suite number again. Emma leaned back slowly. That's impossible. Unless they weren't separate companies at all. They were shells. Different names. Different bank accounts. The same destination. Someone had built an entire network of fake contractors. The following morning, Emma arrived early. Too early. The employee parking garage was nearly empty. As she stepped out of the elevator, she noticed 2 men standing beside the housekeeping office. Neither wore hotel uniforms. Neither carried identification badges. One of them glanced directly at her notebook. "Morning." His voice sounded friendly. His eyes didn't. Emma smiled politely. "Morning. Working on homework." He nodded toward the notebook. Something like that. She walked away without another word. Halfway down the hallway, she looked back. The men hadn't moved. They were watching her. Not the hallway. Not the employees. Her. A cold feeling settled over her. For the first time, she wondered whether someone already knew she had started asking questions. That afternoon, Emma decided to visit the employee records office. She wanted only one thing: confirmation that Richard Langford had truly died before signing the payment authorization. The clerk searched the database, then frowned. That's strange. What? His personnel file was here yesterday. And now? The clerk typed again. It's gone. Deleted. I don't know. The woman looked genuinely confused. I've never seen this happen. Emma thanked her and quietly left. By the time she reached the lobby, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Someone wasn't simply stealing money. Someone was actively erasing evidence. And if company records were disappearing, whoever was behind it had access far beyond ordinary employees. Emma stepped outside into the cool evening air. Across the street, a black SUV sat parked with its engine running. As she walked toward the bus stop, the SUV pulled away, slowly, following at a distance. She didn't tell herself she was imagining it, because deep down, she knew she wasn't. End of part 2. Emma had uncovered shell companies, forged authorizations, and missing records. But she still lacked one thing: proof. Without proof, she was just another hotel Maid making unbelievable accusations. She had no idea that the proof she needed was already inside the hotel, locked in a room that only 5 executives could enter, and in less than 24 hours, someone would accidentally hand her the key. Emma barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the same 3 things: the forged signature, the missing personnel file, the black SUV that had followed her bus for nearly 20 minutes before disappearing into traffic. She told herself she was overthinking it, but the uneasy feeling stayed with her. By sunrise, she had made a decision. She wouldn't accuse anyone. She wouldn't confront anyone. She would simply find the truth. And if the truth proved she was wrong, she would walk away. At 7:10 a.m., the housekeeping supervisor hurried into the supply room. "Emma, we need your help upstairs." Emma looked up. "Executive floor?" "Yes." The chairman is hosting an emergency strategy meeting. One of the conference attendants called in sick. I need someone to prepare the room. Emma's stomach tightened. She had never been assigned to the executive boardroom. The supervisor handed her a master service key. Fresh coffee, water, notepads. And once the meeting begins, leave immediately. Emma nodded. I understand. The executive boardroom was unlike any other room in the hotel. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Chicago skyline. A 12-foot walnut conference table stretched across the room. Every chair had a nameplate. Every place setting had been arranged with military precision. Emma quietly refilled water glasses. She straightened pens. She aligned folders. One folder caught her attention. Unlike the others, it was bright red. Across the cover, stamped in gold lettering, were the words, "Confidential, board use only." She looked away immediately. That wasn't her business. As she reached for the last coffee cup, a gust of air from the ceiling vent lifted a loose sheet from inside the folder. It floated to the carpet. Instinctively, Emma bent down to pick it up. Before placing it back, her eyes caught a single line near the bottom. Vendor consolidation schedule. Beneath it, 7 contractor names. Emma recognized every one of them. They were the same companies she'd written in her notebook. Different names, same addresses. The page also listed one bank account. Every payment, regardless of the contractor, ended there. Emma's heart pounded. That wasn't coincidence. It couldn't be. Before she could read another word, footsteps echoed outside. She slipped the page back exactly where she'd found it. The executives entered. Emma picked up her card and quietly headed for the door. Just before it closed behind her, she heard the chairman say, "No mistakes today. The auditors leave tomorrow." Emma spent the next hour trying to focus on work. She couldn't. The page she'd seen kept replaying in her mind. Around lunchtime, she found herself in the employee cafeteria. Most tables were empty. Only one man sat alone. David Ellis, the hotel's internal compliance officer. He wasn't an executive. He wasn't part of housekeeping. His job was simple. If someone reported misconduct, it landed on his desk. Emma hesitated, then walked over. "Mr. Ellis?" He looked up kindly. "Yes. May I ask you something?" "Of course." She sat down. "I've noticed something that doesn't seem right." Most people would have interrupted. David didn't. He listened. For nearly 10 minutes. Without checking his phone. Without dismissing her. When she finished, he folded his hands. "Do you have copies?" Emma shook her head. "No. Only notes." "Good." She looked surprised. "Good. If you had copied confidential documents, we'd have another problem." He smiled faintly. "You observed. You didn't steal. That matters." For the first time all week, Emma felt someone believed her. David requested access to the vendor database. Within minutes, his expression changed. "Interesting." "What?" He turned the monitor toward Emma. The payment records were there. The contractor names were there. But one field stood out. Every contractor used the same emergency contact phone number. The same number. 7 different companies. David frowned. That should never happen. He searched the number. The registration appeared almost instantly. The account wasn't owned by a construction company. It belonged to a small office 2 miles away. An office leased by Sterling Administrative Services. Emma had never heard of it. David had. His face turned pale. "They're supposed to manage travel reimbursements. They have nothing to do with construction." Silence filled the office. Then David quietly reached for the phone. "We need corporate compliance." Before he could dial, his computer screen went black. A message appeared. "Access denied." His login had been disabled. David stared at the screen. "That's impossible. My credentials were active this morning." His office phone rang. He answered, listened, then slowly placed the receiver back down. "What happened?" He looked at Emma. "I've just been placed on administrative leave." "For what?" They didn't say. His security badge stopped working less than 2 minutes later. Someone had acted incredibly fast. Too fast. Which meant only one thing. Someone inside the company already knew they were getting close. David stood. "Emma, whatever you do, don't tell anyone else what you've found. They're watching." That evening, Margaret found Emma sitting quietly in their apartment. "You look exhausted." Emma forced a smile. "I'm okay." Her mother sat beside her. "No, you're carrying something." Emma finally told her everything. The forged signatures. The shell companies. David being suspended. The shared phone number. When she finished, Margaret was silent. Then she said something Emma never expected. I believe you. Emma looked up. You do? I've worked in that hotel 22 years. I've learned the difference between a rumor and a pattern. She reached into her purse. I was going to throw this away. It was a cream-colored envelope. No return address. Inside was a single card. Special board session Friday, 9 a.m. Margaret frowned. They accidentally delivered it to housekeeping. Emma looked at the date. Tomorrow. The emergency board meeting. The same meeting where the annual financial report would be approved. If the fraud wasn't exposed before then, the false numbers would become official. At the bottom of the invitation, one sentence stood out. Questions from employees will be accepted during the open forum. Emma read it twice. Then a third time. She looked at her mother. I don't have to sneak into the meeting. Margaret nodded slowly. No. If that's really on the agenda, you can walk through the front door. Emma folded the invitation carefully. For the first time since this began, she knew exactly what she had to do. End of part 3. Tomorrow, the board would gather expecting another routine financial presentation. They had no idea a hotel maid was about to ask one question that would bring an entire $900 million fraud crashing into the open. And this time, the whole board would be listening. By 8:30 Friday morning, the Grand Crescent Hotel ballroom was already full. Board members greeted investors. Financial analysts compared notes. Reporters waited outside, hoping for news about the company's record-breaking year. Emma stood near the back of the room beside her mother. Neither of them had ever entered through the hotel's front entrance for a company event. Margaret whispered, "You don't have to do this." Emma squeezed her mother's hand. "If I stay quiet now, I'll regret it for the rest of my life." The meeting began precisely at 9. Charts filled the giant screens. Profits. Expansion plans. New hotel acquisitions. The chairman smiled proudly. "Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the strongest financial performance in our company's history." Applause echoed through the ballroom. Then came the final item. "Before we adjourn, we'll open the floor for employee questions." The room fell quiet. Almost no one ever asked anything. Emma stood. Every head turned. Some executives recognized her immediately. The chairman frowned. "Yes." She held the microphone with both hands. "My name is Emma Carter. I work in housekeeping. I have one question. If 7 different construction companies received hundreds of millions of dollars, why do they all use the same emergency contact number?" The ballroom became completely silent. Several board members looked toward the chief financial officer. The CFO blinked. "I don't know." Emma continued calmly. "And why were renovation payments approved for buildings that were never renovated?" Still no answer. The chairman shifted uncomfortably. "Those questions can be addressed privately." Emma nodded respectfully. "They could. But the annual report you're asking shareholders to approve is public. So I believe the answers should be public too." Near the front row sat an independent auditor named Olivia Bennett. She had remained silent throughout the meeting. Now she slowly raised her hand. "I'd like to see the vendor records." The chairman hesitated. "They aren't part of today's agenda." Olivia didn't argue. She simply replied, "As lead independent auditor, they are now." The room shifted. Within minutes, laptops opened. Payment records appeared on the large screens. Olivia searched the contractor list. One by one, she entered each emergency contact number. The audience watched in silence. Every company returned the same result. The same office. The same telephone number. The same mailing address. A murmur spread through the ballroom. One shareholder stood. How did no one notice this? No one answered. Olivia kept digging. What account received the transfers after the contractors were paid? The finance department opened another report. Wire transfers appeared. Each contractor had received payment, then transferred nearly the same amount within 48 hours. All roads led to a private investment company registered overseas. Olivia looked toward the board. "I recommend we suspend approval of today's financial statements immediately." A second auditor nodded. "I agree." The chairman's confident expression disappeared. "This meeting is recessed." But no one moved. Investors wanted answers. Employees wanted answers. The board wanted answers. For the first time in years, the people who cleaned the hotel and the people who owned it were asking the same questions. An emergency investigation began that afternoon. By evening, investigators had traced the money through dozens of shell companies. The fraud hadn't been created overnight. It had grown slowly over nearly 5 years. Small false invoices became larger ones. Larger invoices became fake projects. Fake projects became hundreds of millions of dollars. The scheme had depended on one dangerous assumption, that nobody would notice the small details. Nobody, except Emma. She hadn't uncovered the fraud because she was an accountant. She uncovered it because she noticed patterns everyone else ignored. The unused executive suites, the repeated vendor names, the identical contact numbers, the signatures that didn't make sense. Each clue alone meant very little. Together, they revealed the truth. Several weeks later, the investigation was complete. Millions of dollars had already been recovered. Criminal charges were filed against several people involved in the scheme. The board invited every hotel employee to a company gathering. This time, Margaret and Emma entered through the front doors as honored guests. The chairman stepped onto the stage. His voice was noticeably humbler than before. For years, I believed leadership meant having all the answers. I was wrong. Leadership also means listening. He turned toward Emma. Miss Carter, you reminded us that integrity doesn't come with a job title. The ballroom applauded. Then he announced something unexpected. The company was creating a scholarship program for employees and their children who wanted to study business, accounting, hospitality, or law. The first scholarship would be named after Emma's late grandfather, the man who taught her that every detail matters. Emma looked toward her mother. Margaret smiled through tears. I'm so proud of you. Emma smiled back. I couldn't have done it without you. A year later, Emma was no longer working weekend housekeeping shifts. She had transferred into the company's internal audit internship while finishing her accounting degree. She never forgot where she started. Sometimes she still walked the hotel halls before work. Not because she had to, because they reminded her of an important lesson. People often underestimate those they barely notice. But character, curiosity, and honesty don't wear expensive suits. They show up quietly, day after day, doing the right thing even when no one is watching. And sometimes, the person carrying a housekeeping card is the very person who saves the company. If this story inspired you, tell us in the comments. Have you ever been underestimated because of your job, your background, or your education? We'd love to read your story. And if you enjoy uplifting stories about courage, perseverance, and unexpected heroes, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story.